Hello everyone, Kaoz here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. If you've kept an eye on PVM items recently, you should know that we are going through another OSRS Great Depression. Before Doom, my bank sat at about 15 billion GP, and as I'm writing the script, that number is barely above 12 billion. There's one particular item that has taken a massive hit, being the Tumeken Shadow, and it made me curious. Why is it in the bin, and will it ever recover? Which is what today's upload is all about. Boys and girls, if you find this video useful, consider subscribing with notifications on, dropping a fat like for the YouTube overlords, and you can join our Discord server with the link in the description to play with me and our amazing community. I've gotten a lot of questions in my stream chat asking why the Shadow is at an all-time low. The lowest I remember was like 950 mil at some point after the Tombs of Amascut, and then it kept a pretty consistent price between 1 and 1.4 billion GP. And because of a massive crash in the market for PVM items, a lot of people seem to be worried about the Shadow in particular. In today's video, I want to summarize why a mega weapon is going through this, comparing it with the Eye of the Ayak, which is pretty decent when paired with the Confliction Gauntlets whenever you need magic, and we will do this with 10 different PVM encounters to tell you how they rank against each other. At the end, we will talk about potential solutions in which the Shadow would be able to recover, and see if it will ever go back to its former glory. That being said, let's begin. So in case you've been living under a rock, not only are a ton of items dropping in price because of a massive influx of players due to the great WoW exodus, but because whenever a boss drops, it shifts a lot of prices around what items are useful for it. We saw when Tormented Synapses reached upwards of like 80 or 90 million GP when Yama hit the game, and they are now at about 30 million GP. I say this because one of the main reasons why the Shadow has tanked in price is that it is not useful at the Doom of Mokayalto, which is a little weird because a lot of people, myself included, thought that it was going to do great at the newest boss because of the new magic items. But in reality, the Eye of the Ayak is just another weapon, and the Confliction Gauntlet's passive effect does not work with the Shadow. One of the very few things I can flex when it comes to money is buying a scythe for 380 million GP when the hype for the Tombs of Amascut was at an all-time high. And why do I say this? Because the scythe went through almost the same thing the Shadow is going through right now. It is not useful for the hot boss of the moment, and other items do what it can do at a cheaper price. And if you remember, the Fang on Slash was pretty nutty, and it was meta for things like Verdorvis and even Duke Succulus. All of this to say that the combination of an Eye of the Ayak and the Confliction Gauntlets do relatively well where the Shadow shines, and combined they are like 150 million GP at the time of making this video. So with this upload, we will go over many magic-based encounters and ask the question, is it worth selling the Shadow for these two, and if you should panic sell the Shadow or just wait until more content is made around it. Today's video will be all about learning or even polishing previous knowledge, and today's video sponsor Boot.dev also has you covered in that area. Boot.dev is a tool which gamifies your learning experience when it comes to programming, so if you like old school RuneScape, you are going to love the way they track your progress, which features a leveling system and a bunch of achievements. They recently launched a new feature called the Training Grounds, which lets you grind the infinite challenges to prepare you as much as possible before you move on to the next lesson. Other content is free to read and watch, but a paid membership unlocks hands-on coding, game mechanics, and even AI assistance, just to mention a few. The median salary for backend web developers in the US was over $100,000 in 2024, and you could have a pretty good chance to work from home, perfect for AFK old-school RuneScape grinds. They have a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, but if you've been wanting to get into coding, they are definitely top dogs in the industry. If you like what you've heard so far, Boots.dev is hooking you up with a 25% off your entire first year on the platform if you get the annual plan. All you need to do is click the link in the description or the pinned comment, or use my code on screen at checkout for this amazing deal. Thanks to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video, and let's continue. We start with the Kraken because, like you saw in my previous bossing ladder video, it's just tossing a fishing explosive at the whirlpool and attack it until it dies. Literally 2 clicks per fight. This is a weird one because what I'm about to say may contradict the whole point of the video, but actually, I'd still prefer bringing the Sanguinity staff here to stay here for the entire trip. It's only like 25 million GP, so this will be the only boss in which I would recommend something other than the Eye of the Ayak or the Shadow. When it comes to the other two weapons though, the Eye of the Ayak can definitely pack quite a punch. Its quick 3-tick attack speed will dispose of the Kraken rather fast, and the charges are not too expensive either, needing only Death and Chaos runes, or 1 demonic tier per cast. Remember that if you miss an attack, the Confliction Gauntlets will give you something similar to a Fang passive effect with magic on one-handed magic weapons with the same spell on the same target. Obviously, the Shadow hits bigger numbers, but it definitely feels quite sluggish since the Kraken is not beefy whatsoever. If you're just getting started with your Kraken tasks, definitely consider using the Sanguinesti staff, especially because of the combat achievements, and if you can afford it, an Eye of the Ayak feels a lot better against this boss. I personally killed a thermonuclear smoke devil with melee using the Radix method, because ever since I was able to get smoke devil tasks, magic seemed a little more inconvenient. You need to freeze the Thermy at the right time, and when it unfreezes, you need to wait a few seconds for the snare to come into effect again. This makes it so you take a little bit more damage when necessary without proper timing, so for me, melee and walking under will always be the way to go. What I just said about magic only applies to the Shadow or even a Sanguinesti staff or the Trident because they actually have the range to do the freeze method, so you're not tanking hits. By standing on the 4 tiles south of the cave, you can attack at maximum distance, and Thermy will just be hanging out wondering what the hell is going on. When the snare wears off, wait like 4 or 5 seconds to freeze again and move back 1 tile. This will let you take minimal damage, making magic Thermy pretty chill, and will let you free up some inventory space for your loot. Kills with the Eye of the Ayak feel a little faster, meaning that this is yet another place where I would recommend the one-handed magic weapon, but there's a slight catch to it. And it is that even on long range, the maximum distance you can attack from is not far away enough to avoid attacks from Thermy, meaning that I was simply doing the redemption method I do with melee. If you bring a full inventory of prayer potions, you will be able to stay here for a long time, but it is important to note that the attacks are typeless ranged base damage, meaning that although you cannot protect against it, the attacks will be pretty accurate against your magic armor, meaning you will proc redemption a lot more commonly than with melee. Time for one of my favorite encounters, the Dagannoth Kings. Even with a late game gear not including mega weapons, the rotation can definitely be under control for things not to get out of hand, with multiple spawns so you have to pray or flick. Before mega weapons, I used to come here with a Sanguinesti staff for the heals, a trusty blowpipe, and a tentacle whip. And after getting pretty decent gear, I upgraded to a scythe, a T-bow, and a shadow, which obviously melted them. And it made me wonder, is the Eye of the Ayak better against Rex? Because of its nearly zero magic defense, it's pretty common for people to come here with melee tank armor and just a trident. If you're an iron, you know what I'm talking about. So a shadow obviously destroys the hell out of it. Some of the kills I was getting lasted literally less than 20 seconds from the moment my first hit landed, and going to the safe spot I'm showing in the video will make it so he can't attack you, and you will just have to protect against the Sinolips. And to absolutely no one's surprise, the Eye of the Ayak with the Confliction Gauntlets actually do pretty well here. I mean, if a Trident in melee tank armor can dispose of Rex quickly, this nasty combo can also delete him rather fast. Despite the Eye, the Gauntlets, and the Ward being a nice combo, I feel like this is almost like the Kraken where you can literally use anything. But since we are strictly comparing these two, this would be another win for the Eye of the Ayak. Just make sure to use Blood Barrage to heal every now and then, otherwise no passive we would get like with the Sanguinesti staff. The Giant Mole is also a pretty easy boss anyone can do with the different types of gear. You can do it with a Verox camping low HP, a Bofa, I've even seen some people using a Fang, and of course a powerful twisted bow like what I did when I was hunting for the pet. More recently, you can also use Earth spells since the Mole got a new elemental weakness to Earth spells, so pairing it up with the Tome of Earth will definitely do wonders. No beating around the bush for this one, this is one of the encounters we have seen so far where the Shadow comes out on top. But Kaoz, I hear you say, of course a 1 billion GP weapon is going to be to 2 items worth around 150 mil. And call me crazy, but this one is not because of the damage. If you remember, when the Giant Mole falls below a certain hit point threshold, it has a chance to dig and go to a new location. Because the Shadow does more damage per hit, the chance of you chipping down its health bar is way higher, meaning less chances to hit under the threshold and avoid running around like a headless chicken. That being said though, the Eye of the Ayak was pretty decent for the price, and where the Shadow saw pretty quick kills of like 20 seconds, the Eye does not have this luxury. Average kill times are obviously higher, not because of the lack of DPS, but like I said, it will be a lot more common for the Mole to dig around after a little bit, especially because of the Eye's 3 tick attack speed. I'm not saying you need this or even a mega weapon to kill the mole efficiently, but if you can spoil yourself during your pet hunt, the Shadow is still the way to go. The old school RuneScape community is pretty divisive, but just like AFK gains and making money, I think we can all agree that the Kalphite Queen sucks major cheeks. Like I said in my bossing ladder video, all this boss can do is hit like a truck. Because of this, the only way you can stay here longer is by dealing the best damage possible, and I took our 2 new toys to this encounter on a Slayer task to see how they do. If using the Shadow, you should always walk under when it's on cooldown, and this means that you and the KQ will trade the blows 1 for 1. Otherwise, her 4-tick attack speed will make it so she lands 2 hits for each of your own. For the longest time, I was doing the melee with ranged method even when owning a Shadow, but honestly this has been the way to go for many months now. And this is one of the encounters I was the most curious to see how the eye would fare against it. To my surprise, and after trying it on a few bosses before the Kalphite Queen, the one-handed weapon definitely lacks a little bit of DPS. Again, some of you might be like, well duh, the other weapon is worth 1 billion GP. But seeing the pattern of the Eye of the Ayak at the bare minimum competing well against the Shadow, this one was kind of awkward. The 3-tick attack speed makes it so you can walk under for 2 ticks and then attack, and there will be times in which you cannot keep up a cycle for the Kalphite Queen to hit you once for each of your 2 attacks consistently. I loved trying this one out and will definitely make the Kalphite Queen head grind more tolerable if you don't have a casual 1 billion GP laying around, so give it a try if you still don't have the Elite Desert Diary. Probably the most requested boss on this list is Zulrah. As most of you know, because of the Noxious Halberd buff making it able to hit Zulrah turn it into one of the best ways to kill it along items like the Crystal Halberd and the Eclipse Atlatl. In my honest opinion though, I will stick to ranged and magic because it still feels pretty decent, and I already built the muscle memory to get fast kills with it, as opposed to learning another method even if it's slightly more efficient. Yapping aside, one of the biggest downsides of using a Shadow here is that Zulrah has a damage cap of 50. Remember that this was the very first original boss in old school RuneScape, added all the way back in January of 2015. And yes, that is 10 years ago, so you're welcome for making you feel like a fossil. I say this because I have no idea why this damage cap was added, and I doubt that Jagex will remove it since we have weapons that can actually surpass that damage cap, as opposed to weapons back in 2015 probably not able to hit anything above a 50. That being said though, the Eye of the Ayak is very strong here because the max hit with my setup is like 43 or 46, and it does not surpass the damage cap, meaning you're not quote-unquote wasting any damage. This is pretty much the first time I mentioned the special attack despite me using it for Dragon Knives, since the Eye special will drain magic defense equal to the damage dealt, so you can think of it as a magic BGS. So if you don't have Dragon Knives, this would be a great place to use a special at the beginning of the fight. All in all, I will definitely be switching to the one-handed weapon when I go hunting for my Zulrah pet, since kill times feel really good as opposed to with the Shadow. I also wanted to try both items at Kree'arra since my preferred method of killing the Armadillo General is with the Shadow, and I wondered if there's a better or similar way to kill it with magic if you don't have a mega weapon. Fair warning that if you still don't want to use either of these, the Chinchompa method is still something I will always recommend because of how easy it is to learn on a budget. This is another instance of us attacking with the Shadow and walking under the boss for 4 ticks, so we go blow for blow. What I personally do is land 1 hit, and then switching to my Nightmare Staff to freeze the melee minion and avoid a little bit of chip damage throughout the fight. While frozen, just keep walking under and trading hits until he dies, and then freeze the melee 1 more time next to the ranged minion, kill the major, and then heal off of the 2 remaining minions to go back to full HP. I think the Eye of the Ayak is comparable to a Bofa. It's not necessarily super accurate, but when it hits, it can actually slap since the max hit comes out to above 40, like we mentioned before. Just like the Kalphite Queen, Kree's 4-tick attack cycle will make it a little awkward for the timing, as you are out for 1 tick and under him for 2. Regardless, it didn't really feel as miserable as at the time when I was doing Zilliana, but if you don't have a Shadow, definitely stick to Chinchompas for less convoluted kills. I've always said that the Whisperer feels like a completely different fight without the Shadow, and another super popular request on my stream was to compare both the weapons at this Desert Treasure 2 boss. I've seen a lot of people struggle massively because they rock either a Warp Scepter or a Trident, and for someone without a mega weapon, this will be one of the toughest fights leading up to tougher PVM challenges, and the hardest one out of the 4 DT2 encounters. Not much needs to be said about the Shadow. Its sheer power will destroy the Whisperer, and you get super quick KCs, as this is pretty decent moneymaker even if you don't get perfect KCs for additional loot that isn't a unique. You will have to take care of specials more often because you're doing more damage, but nothing a little bit of muscle memory can't fix. When Jagex said that the Eye of the Ayak would bridge the gap between the Shadow and items like the Sanguinisty Staff and Trident-like weapons, this is where that statement is the most obvious. I'm happy to say that this is probably the boss where the difference is very noticeable, and although it's obviously not as good as Shadow, it's not as miserable as doing it without it. Whatever you want out of the Whisperer, including the Axe Piece, the Pet, the Ring, or just making extra cash and you don't have money for a Shadow, I would absolutely get the Eye of the Ayak and Confliction Gauntlets to get the grind going. Pretty big for the combo, but obviously the Shadow keeps the crown here. Our second to last encounter is the Phosani's Nightmare. Thanks to a recent update, Jagex removed an entire phase to make the fight quicker, and we are of course testing both the magic weapons at the pillars to see how fast they can go. And like I said in my bossing ladder video, you definitely want to get good at this boss to start preparing for tougher challenges. When testing KCs for this boss, I got a new personal best very casually by not paying much attention, so I know that if I focus up and get good RNG, sub 5 minute is definitely possible. The Shadow is absolutely disgusting here because one of my hits dealt like 160 damage to the pillar, putting it at a little over half a charge, meaning that with good RNG, you can basically two-shot the pillars. It felt great, but when the Shadow doesn't hit as high, you're really gonna be lacking a lot of DPS. And one of the pillars during one of the phases took like 8 hits because I could not get decent RNG. This is where the Eye of the Ayak comes into play. Because of the faster attack speed, even if you hit the lower numbers, you'll hit faster, so more chances to charge the pillar quicker. Remember that the Confliction Gauntlet's passive does not come into effect here because you will always hit, but you want to be wearing them regardless. Despite this powerful combination doing wonders for the Nightmare, the Shadow takes a slight edge, making it your weapon of choice if you have a casual 1 billion GP laying around. And of course, we cannot talk about the Tumeken Shadow without going to the tombs of Amascut. We will make this segment a little quicker because, I mean, the Shadow is obviously going to win here, but if you're an Iron looking for the mega weapon, or just doing some expert runs for cash until you save up for one, the Eye of the Ayak is actually pretty useful. I don't even need to go into detail about the Shadow because its passive effect quadruples magic accuracy and damage as opposed to triple outside of the raid, but when used against Akka, Zebak, and the Wardens, it will wreak havoc inside the tomb. I really like the Eye of the Ayak at the Monkey Puzzle Room because it one-shots melee monkeys and you can kill them a lot quicker, and the melee Scarab also melts rather quickly. You can do the 3-tick butterfly at Akka method with the Eye, but just for the sake of the video I tanked the hits just to see how it does, and it actually works pretty decent. It starts lacking some DPS at the Wardens, since the Obelisk took quite a bit to die. However, P2 was not too bad. What felt pretty underwhelming though was the final phase, but with Insanity on, you can get a pretty good cycle going to not waste any ticks. This comparison was mostly for fun, as nothing will ever beat the Shadow at the Tombs of Amascut, but if you have an Eye of the Ayak and not the mega weapon, definitely use it here for better DPS than a Sanguinisty Staff or a Trident style weapon. In conclusion, as you can tell, the Shadow isn't only dropping because it's not good at the Doom of Makayotl, and items not good at the latest boss tend to go down, which kinda held the Shadow's price for Yama since it was actually useful there. But because 2 items worth 150 million GP do what the Shadow does, obviously not at the same level, but comes really close at a fraction of the cost. Now, will the Shadow ever recover? I think that if Jagex wants to bring back the Shadow to at least over 1 billion GP, the next main boss encounter definitely has to be magic based, and make the Shadow marginally better than other weapons to actually feel the difference, and so people want to buy it again to get some uniques. I personally don't think we will see another major piece of PVM content until after sailing, but I guess only time will tell. To answer another common question on stream, if you have a Shadow, should you sell it? Or if you don't have one, should you buy it? That always comes down to what content you want to do. Do you want to make money and hit up the Tombs of Amascut, Zulrah, or the Whisperer, just to mention a few? If you have spare cash and can buy one without selling key items, I would say go for it. If you want to sell it, make sure it's because you need the money for another mega weapon that you are actually going to camp it until you make that money back. because if you sell it for the sake of panic selling it, you may get seller's remorse later, and it could go up in price, meaning you lost money anyway if you get it again, especially after taxes. So boys and girls, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed and you learned something useful. If you did, tell me what you think of the shadow, if you think it will go back up in price and why, and if you include the term RSN and your username in your comment, you'll be entered in our weekly bond giveaway for which we will pick a winner on Friday's stream. I want to give a massive thank you to all the people you see on screen for supporting the channel with a monthly subscription. Your contributions help me feed my family in a third world country and help an animal shelter with food and medicine for puppies in need. If you enjoy what I do here, click the join button below to see all of the cool perks and benefits you can enjoy in the videos, in the live streams, and of course in the Discord for a monthly fee. A final thank you to boot.dev for sponsoring this video, so if you've been wanting to get into coding for a long time, this is a perfect time to do it, with a link in the description or the pinned comment for a massive discount in your annual plan. In the next one, we will have an updated Inferno video, since my last one was well over 3 years ago, and I want to show you how to properly do it now without just this year. For now, I hope you have an amazing day, have an amazing week, and I will see you then. Peace.